Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about birth stories. On my intro video, I had mentioned I am a mom. Can't remember if I mentioned I am a mom of 3 girls. I'll have to go back and watch my own video. But first, let me start out by saying that I am no way giving medical advice. I'm not a doctor. This is just my experience with birth, labor, and all the things in between. So today I wanted to talk about my birth story with my oldest. She just turned 5 in October, so that's crazy to think it's been that long, but I'm sure everybody feels that way about all their babies. But hers was very interesting. I feel like I am very blessed that I have had great pregnancies with all 3 of my girls. And then labor kind of just, it goes all out the window with all of them actually. All 3 of my deliveries have been different, but let's get into the first one. My due date was October 13th. I was really excited because my favorite number is 13. And it was Friday the 13th, my actual due date. So I was really excited, but kind of thinking like I wouldn't make it to that day, or she would just be late, because everybody says that your first one always comes late. So I was kind of bummed, but hopeful, like maybe somehow she would be born on her due date. Fast forward 9-10 months pregnancy. I get to, it is the night of October 8th. It's a Sunday night. I had leaned over to my husband and told him that I didn't want him to go back to work. Like, we had such a great weekend. Him, his dad, and his brother had just finished the crib that they had built for our daughter that day. So it was just a really great weekend. And I leaned over to him before we went to bed and said, I wish you didn't have to go to work tomorrow. And it was about 9:45 when we were going to bed. I woke up about 2 hours later, sat up, felt kind of weird, went to the bathroom and realized that I had some fluid. And I'm thinking like, oh my goodness, did I pee my pants? Did I wet the bed? So I go back to the bed, feel the bed, feel my spot, and there wasn't anything on the bed. And I'm like, I would know if I peed my pants or not. But it just was this like weird feeling. So I tapped my husband. I'm like, I think my water broke. He's like, oh my gosh, okay. So I call the labor and delivery triage, and I said, I think my water broke, but I'm not 100% sure. So I'm kind of just calling to see what I'm supposed to do. And the first thing they said is, well, did you relieve yourself? And I'm like, well, I just did in the bathroom a couple minutes ago, but no, I don't believe so. And they said, okay, well, go ahead and lay back down. And if you start to feel a rush of fluid, then, go ahead and come on in. And I'm like, okay. So I told my husband, I think we have a bit of time. Like, I think we're good. And he's like, okay. So he like kind of gets situated back in bed and proceeds to try and fall asleep. I lay back down, and all of a sudden I just feel a whoosh. And I'm like, oh, just kidding. Honey, we gotta go. So we grab our stuff, we get in the car, we go. We get to the hospital, they send a wheelchair down for me, and they're like, are you sure you ruptured? And I'm like, yeah, I felt a really big, and they're like, okay. So they test, they make sure, yep, your water's broken, let's get you all set up. We'll get you into a room, we'll get you a gown. So they start doing all the things, and this is about 1 a.m. now, and it's 1 a.m. October 9th. So I'm thinking, okay, baby's gonna come on, October 9th. Cool. When they're checking me in, they, put the IV in, they take your blood pressure, all that. And they took my blood pressure and it was 145/90. And normally this isn't a huge deal to some people, but my blood pressure always runs super low, meaning I'm usually 108/72. And I was that all throughout my pregnancy. That's what I run. So when they took it, I kind of looked up at the screen. I'm like, oh, and they looked at me and they're like, is this normal? And I'm like, no, it's not normal. And they're like, okay, let's take it again. Took it again. It was high, once again, 150/90, or in that range. And so they kind of started asking me questions. My legs were super swollen. My feet were swollen because I did work up until I was 36 weeks pregnant, and I worked at Starbucks. So I was on my feet all the time, just going. And so my feet were constantly swollen. But I thought that was just how it was. So they determined that I had preeclampsia, which kind of scared me. They did have to put me on magnesium, and so that was an extra thing that I was getting into my IV, but they seemed to have things under control. We were just waiting. It felt like I was there forever. I was, but so I'm thinking baby's gonna be born October 9th. Okay, cool. We go through the whole day, and I'm just not dilating at a high speed. It's just like slowly getting there. I'm super uncomfortable, and I don't know, my mom sees it in my face, my husband sees it, and I'm just kind of waiting. They give me this pillow I don't know, they call it the peanut pillow. My sister had her baby about 3 weeks earlier, so she told me, if you're having trouble, ask for the peanut, and they put it in between your legs, and I guess it helps you just like open you up, essentially. I had that throughout the day and then into the night, and that seemed to help. But again, it was just going so slow, and I was so uncomfortable. I ended up getting the epidural late Monday night, so it was still October 9th. I ended up getting the epidural, and I think that process kind of scared my husband more than it scared me. Just the big needle going into your back, and you have to stay super still, and it's hard when you're in between contractions. And so, but the anesthesiologist was great. She was amazing, and she held me and told me, you're doing so good, you're doing great. I can't thank her enough, just because it's, like I said, it's so hard sitting still while you're in the middle of a contraction, and then a needle's going into your back. And so, but that happened. And then, a while after, I kind of was sitting there, and I'm like, I still feel everything as I did like before the epidural. So I said to my nurse, I don't know, like, I still feel everything. And she's like, well, where can you feel it? And I'm like, where I shouldn't feel it. She's like, okay, let's move you around a little bit. And then after moving me around a bit, they discovered that all of the juice, I guess I'll say, went to my legs. It didn't go anywhere else. It just went down to my legs and numbed my legs completely. Everything else I had feeling. I felt everything. So they asked me if I wanted to try it again. I declined, just because I felt if it went to my legs the first time, who's to say it wouldn't go to my legs the second time? So at that point, I just kind of sucked it up and said, we're just going to do it the way it panned out. So fast forward, I'm finally to the point where I can push, and I don't want to say luckily, but since my epidural didn't work, I knew when I was getting contractions before they showed up on the monitor. So when my nurse was asking me if I was ready, I asked her, I'm like, can I push? I feel a contraction coming on. And she was like, oh, you feel it? And I'm like, yes, can I start pushing? And she was like, yep, let's go. So every time I asked, I'm like, oh, can I push now? So we push, I think it was like the 10 seconds, they count to 10 and then relax. So I think I started pushing at around 6 a.m. So we're into October 10th now. So I started pushing around 6 a.m. Obviously I didn't push for the entire 2 hours. I hear mixed reviews. A lot of people say that if you push more, if you start pushing and it gets past 2 hours, they don't allow you to push anymore. My daughter ended up being born at 7:34 a.m. So I started pushing at 6. And with every, you don't push. You push for 10 seconds, then you break, and then every time you get a contraction. But my nurse, again, amazing. She was the night nurse, and she had asked me, they work a 7 to 7, and the latest she could possibly stay was 7:30. So before I started really pushing, like it started to get like the baby was coming, she leaned in my ear and was like, the day nurse can come take over. The latest I can stay is 7:30, but if you want me here, I'm here. I'm here for you. And I said, I would love if you stayed, if you can. And she said, all right. So she stayed a little bit past 7:30. I pushed our daughter out, and the nurse leaned in my ear and told me I did a great job. I thanked her, and she was off. But then the morning nurse took over. So, but then after I had, pushed our daughter out, they gave her to me, and the doctor was trying to close everything up, and I was holding her on my chest, and I remember looking at my husband, and I looked at my mom, and then I see them looking at each other, and they just like start to look concerned, and I kept bleeding. The magnesium caused my blood not to clot, essentially. So I just remember looking at them and holding my daughter, and I was like, and I started to shake, and I told them, and my sister was in the room, one of my sisters was in the room, and I told them somebody needs to take her. I'm gonna drop her, because I was shaking so bad. And so somebody took her, and it took a bit for the doctor to get my uterus to stop contracting, but it ended up stopping. But I did hemorrhage quite a bit, not to the point where I needed a blood transfusion or anything, but I did hemorrhage quite a bit, which was scary. And I was just going in thinking I had this great pregnancy, this delivery is going to be great. It turned into I was in labor for 32 hours at the end of everything. I gave birth to our daughter, and then I ended up hemorrhaging. I honestly don't really remember holding her that much. All I remember, like I said, is telling somebody they need to take her, because I was shaking so much and I felt like I was gonna shake her out of my arms, essentially. But everything got under control. But bringing it back, with what happened to me, I was able to help one of my other sisters realize that she had preeclampsia. Her feet started to get super swollen, all the way up to her legs. Her blood pressure started to get high. My preeclampsia didn't happen until my water broke, they didn't discover that until my water broke and I was in the hospital. But leading up to the end of her pregnancy, my sister started to get high blood pressure readings. Her legs became super swollen. And, you know, she's telling me what's going on. My mom's kind of relaying things back to me. And I told my mom, I'm like, she has preeclampsia. Like, she ended up having to go for the stress test once a week just to kind of monitor her and the baby. And then they ended up taking the baby early. They ended up inducing my sister just for the safety of her and her baby. I feel like there isn't anything that could have happened or they could have prevented with me, just because my blood pressure wasn't spiking at any of my appointments. It happened after my water broke, when I got to the hospital. But these little things, I don't want to say I'm glad it happened to me, but at least something positive could come out of what my experience was, that I could help my sister and kind of let her know, like, this is what's going to happen. They're going to get you on magnesium, and they're probably going to take you early. It was kind of up in the air if they were going to do a C-section or not. They ended up not having to do that, thank goodness. But she was at one of her stress tests, and it was basically at the drop of a dime. She was there and they said, we have an opening at Palomar at the hospital. You need to go now. Like, we're taking you in now. So that's how it happened. I'm happy to report my daughter was healthy as can be. We actually ended up having to stay extra for me, not for her, which is good. I just needed to be monitored. They needed to monitor my blood pressure. I had to stay on the magnesium for 24 hours after I gave birth, and then 24 hours they had to monitor me without the magnesium after. So anyways, if you guys have birth stories that you guys want to talk about or something else, I'm going to share my next birth story with my second born on the next episode, which is entirely different as well. Like I said, I have 3 daughters and all 3 deliveries were completely different. So if you guys want to share something about your birth story, drop it in the comments and be sure to subscribe. Bye.